I found out that my brother Roger and my fiancée Kathy had been having an affair 5 years ago, just 1 month before my wedding. Only because she was pregnant and wanted to keep the child did Kathy, who is now 30, come out. The fact that Roger, who is now 33, and Kathy had been connected since our engagement made the betrayal much more painful. Since our junior year of high school, Kathy and I had remained together through college and beyond. After spending so much time together, getting engaged had seemed like the logical next step. However, my brother admitted to Kathy that he had always had emotions for her soon after we became engaged. He said he could no longer keep it to himself, because our wedding was coming up. This somehow made Kathy realize that she had been becoming fond of him as well. Even at family get-togethers, they would occasionally flirt behind my back, but she said she had stayed with me because she wasn't sure about Roger. My whole life fell apart 5 years ago, only a few months before my wedding. My parents, brother Roger and Kathy, sat me down to deliver the news. They informed me that Kathy couldn't marry me as she was in love with Roger and expecting his kid, but they still intended to stay together. I was inconsolable and found it difficult to comprehend. I was so shocked that I urged Kathy to stop whatever she was doing with Roger and come home with me. However, my mother assertively intervened, stating that such an event would not occur. Roger and Kathy were going to be together, she claimed, and she told me I had to accept that as it was their decision in the end. Her reaction shocked me. She was more than simply their supporter. She pretended that my emotions were unimportant. My mom was unabashedly on their side, but my dad, who at least looked ashamed, tried to console me. She even informed me that since Kathy was pregnant and in a delicate state, I had no right to worry her and should keep my problems to myself. I got the impression that my own mother had abandoned me. Any worry about what I was going through was totally eclipsed by my mother's delight at the prospect of finally having a grandchild in the family. She put up a fierce fight with me, defending everything as though it were somehow appropriate. Following that traumatic encounter, Kathy moved in with my family because her own parents severed their relationship with her after discovering the truth. In order to save me the financial burden, my parents paid for the cancellation of my wedding, of course. However, I was effectively expelled from the family as a result of my reluctance to communicate with them. We haven't communicated in the last 5 years. There has been complete radio quiet ever since my father made one attempt to contact me, but I didn't reply. I needed a lot of treatment and a long time to start getting over what had occurred. We'd been together for so long, Kathy and I. Getting to where I am today was a long and terrible road since I genuinely loved her. I've learned to deal with it, but I wouldn't say I'm totally over it. I was informed that Kathy had a boy with my brother by a few other family members who continued to communicate with me. A paternity test a month after the birth verified that Roger, not me, was the father. I didn't hear from my family for 5 years. I thought things was going well for Kathy and Roger when they got married and had a family. However, my mother unexpectedly contacted me about a week ago. Her call caught me off guard since she had always been the most outspoken advocate of Kathy and Roger's relationship. She wrote me an email stating that she needed to talk to me immediately, so I decided to give her a call back out of curiosity. She was weeping when she called me back and broke some heartbreaking news. My brother had been involved in a serious hit-and-run accident. He went into a coma as a result of the hit, and the physicians were unable to determine if or when he would awaken. My mother chose to tell me about the accident, which occurred only a week ago, 3 days after the doctors deemed his condition serious. I initially believed my mother was phoning to beg me to go see Roger in the hospital and help the family through this trying time. I could see why they may want me there, though, considering how bad Roger's health was. However, my mother then took a totally different turn. She expressed her desire for me to take charge and support Kathy and my nephew, but I was perplexed and asked what she meant. She clarified that because Roger was practically no longer there, she wanted me to take up his responsibilities and provide Kathy and her kid with all the help they needed, not just financial support, but also living with them and looking after them. My mother said that although she would have taken them in herself, she believed she was too elderly to handle the duty. She even thought I would make a decision right away. It seemed unbelievable to me. My mother's first words to me after we had been silent for 5 years were not an olive branch or an apology, but rather a plea that I intervene on behalf of those who had deceived me. Right now, Kathy and her kid need family support, but I shouldn't be the one providing it because I'm the one they injured and shunned. I strongly informed my mother that I would not be engaging in such behavior, and that she was stupid for even anticipating it. I was already annoyed and didn't want to expend any more energy on it when my mother began arguing with me on the phone. I simply ended the call and blocked her number once more. I made an effort to carry on with my day, but I couldn't help but feel sorry for Roger and Kathy. Nevertheless, it was impossible for me to assume my brother's place. My mother was acting as though Roger had completely passed away, yet he was still alive, just in a coma. I felt queasy about the whole thing. I made the decision to give my dad a call later. I believed he may provide a more balanced viewpoint because he had often been the more sensible of my parents. After a little banter, I asked him how Roger was doing, even though it felt strange to speak to him after 5 years. It was hard to hear him affirm that Roger's situation was not looking well. In the hopes that he would see my point of view, or at the very least provide some rational perspective, I next informed him about the discussion with my mother. I was shocked to learn that he agreed with her, stating that it was reasonable for her to want me to stand by Kathy and her kid. I was taken aback. I had hoped that my dad would recognize the oddity of the request, but he was also urging me in the direction of the same thing that I found disturbing and irrational. My dad acknowledged that he meant it when I pressed him. He honestly believed that since we had a past and I was still related to Kathy and my nephew, even after the previous 5 years, I should defend them. He didn't think my mother's demands were unrealistic and maintained that I should be the family's go-to person in an emergency. That remark caught me off guard. Since then, I have been unsure of how to react. I haven't spoken to any family members, even other relatives, for the last week because I'm afraid they'll bring it up and I'll have to defend myself. I feel like the evil person since I didn't support my family at their difficult time. I am aware that they require emotional, if not monetary support. However, my mother's question seems strange and invasive. The whole thing feels so weird and overwhelming that I haven't even seen Roger at the hospital. I haven't discussed it with any friends either, due to the fact that it is really personal. Since my wedding was put off, my friends have been aware of the gap with my family, but this is a whole new level of embarrassment and bewilderment. I'm at a loss for how to manage everything, and I'm caught between my desire for limits and my sense of duty to my family. I can't find a workable answer, and I feel like I'm regressing to the dark time in my life when I was plagued by thoughts of Roger and Kathy after learning of their treachery. I don't want to return there, because it took a lot of effort for me to get away. I've made the decision not to go see my family just yet. It's simply too much to handle. It wasn't until I recognized how much this scenario had escalated over the preceding week that I understood how much worry it was generating. I'm attempting to deal by taking my anti-anxiety medications again. It has been amazing how many people have expressed their love and support by leaving comments on my initial article, and even getting in touch with me directly. Everyone who has reminded me that I'm not alone has my sincere gratitude. Since I really can't manage this alone, I've also spoken out to a few close pals about what's been going on. They have told me that the best thing I can do for myself is to decide not to go at this time. They made the point that since Roger and my family have always prioritized their own needs, it's time for me to follow suit. To be honest, I also don't think I need to provide them with emotional support. They can rely on one another. I very clearly recall how isolated I felt after learning of the treachery and the cancellation of the wedding, and how, in times of need, my family put my brother before me. Now that it's behind me, I'm concentrating on getting over it. I've banned all of my family members once more, and have made a commitment to avoid communication with them, because I know that if I get back in touch with them, I won't be able to move on. I sincerely apologize for my brother's ordeal, and wish him a speedy recovery. I can't bring myself to wish someone bad luck, regardless of what he has done. I wish them luck, but I have to take care of my own mental health first. Given how much my parents' remarks have impacted me, I'm thinking of returning to therapy. I felt like I was handling things better, but now the old emotions are coming back, and I believe it would help to speak with a professional. According to certain family members, my brother's condition is still severe, and he hasn't showed any indications of getting better. He had remained in the hospital for about 2 weeks. Though there isn't much I can do, I feel bad for my family. In the last 2 weeks, everyone else who knows my family has paid at least one visit to the hospital to express their sympathies. While I have not been present, I would have thought about going, but I found out from my family that my parents have been disparaging me to anybody who comes to see. They're making me the villain by saying that I turned down their invitation to come help the family. They've even said that my brother deserves this, implying that it's retribution for what transpired 5 years ago. I never said anything like that, just so you know. Given that it didn't sound like anything I would say, some family members inquired as to whether these charges were accurate. Considering that I make an effort to be a kind person in general, I told them straight out that my parents were lying to make me appear bad when they inquired, perhaps in response to my choice to break up my relationship with them. After they had already upset my life once, I was rather dismayed to learn that they were spreading such lies. I am appreciative that my family members sought clarity from me. I may have been cut off from the rest of the family once more if they had simply taken my parents' word for it. My aunts, uncles, and cousins have all been there for me throughout the last 5 years, even though I haven't talked to my parents. My parents apparently couldn't tolerate that I still had those ties, so they attempted to undermine those as well, since they didn't want me to lose that connection. I simply don't understand why they hate me so deeply. Nothing I've done has earned this. My parents have always given preference to my brother, and we have never had a strong connection, but this seems excessive and totally unneeded. My mom made the decision to get in touch with me once more. She was forced to come to my house to speak with me, because I had blocked them on all platforms. She was waiting for me at home when I got home from work. I must admit that I was too tired from work to be in the mood to converse. I was on the verge of getting back in my car to get away from her. But she saw me and I had to talk to her. Since it would be hard to get rid of her once she was inside my home, I didn't want to let her in. I decided to talk to her in the front yard instead, but it was a horrible choice since she finally began to shout, attracting our neighbors' attention. The start of the talk was somewhat quiet. I answered her courteously when she engaged in small chat, but I couldn't contain myself any longer, so I asked her why she was making up stories about me to make me the villain. Despite how my family has treated me, I've never desired harm on them, so I told her it wasn't fair. They were making it very difficult for me to go on with my life, which was all I really wanted to do. Everything simply poured out when I finally met her since I had suppressed these emotions for so long. I was unable to stop myself. Ultimately, I informed her that they had never treated me like a family, and that it was difficult for me to see them as such after everything that had transpired. I told them how disappointed I was with their conduct, and that whatever she had come to talk about should wait. I wasn't in the mood to argue or have an emotionally taxing debate because I had just returned from work. She had been listening to me quietly up until that point, but she became quite upset when I told her that I didn't want to speak with her right now. She stated that she and my father had now come to the realization that they had not treated me properly over the previous 5 years, and that she was there to apologize for all I had expressed. She said that I hadn't been going to see my brother in the hospital since I was clearly distressed. She thought that the family should remain together for emotional stability during this difficult period, therefore she insisted on coming to work things out between us. But when I informed her that I didn't want to chat, she lost it and chose to scream at me instead. She said that given my reaction when I found out about my brother's injury, I should simply be thankful that I had a family at all. She claimed to have considered cutting me off entirely and ensuring that the other members of my family followed suit. Her claim baffled me, so she went on to say that she thought my response wasn't depressing enough. She must have thought that when I received the news, I would be more emotional, but I sounded unconcerned over the phone. Hearing anything like that would surely touch me, regardless of our personal problems, and it really did. Despite our tense ties, I never wished anyone, including my family, any harm. She couldn't see my face, so maybe my speech didn't convey how sad I was about his accident. Her justifications were utterly nonsensical and unfounded. She even went so far as to imply that my failure to stand up for my brother and my lack of support for Kathy and my nephew showed how little I cared for the family. She was only making things up once more to defend their actions. And since this whole thing is so strange and needless, I genuinely believe my folks are beginning to lose their minds. I had little interest in carrying on the talk once she began to shout at me. I made the decision to ask her to leave by going inside my home. She continued to yell at me when I eventually opened the door and entered. I was furious and didn't want to talk to her anymore, so I slammed the door in her face when she attempted to follow me inside and ordered her to go. I threatened to contact the police, but she persisted in her argument. She finally departed at that point, but not before berating me and warning me that I would pay for my deeds. I don't know what that implies, and to be honest, I don't want to know. All I want to do is unwind and go about my life. After 26 days following the tragedy, my family is now able to share some positive news. Naturally, they didn't tell me directly. My cousins told me about it. The good news is that my brother is at last getting well. He is responding well and is no longer in a coma. It is encouraging. Even though I'm no longer a member of the family and have been essentially pushed out, the past month has been extremely stressful for everyone, including myself, so I sincerely hope he keeps getting well from now on. I've learned how insane my parents are by the way they've been treating me over the last 26 days. They seem to have been venting their displeasure on me. I didn't hear from my mother for a few days following our last conversation, which I detailed in my earlier report. My father then called me, but I didn't recognize him since he used a different number than usual. Without waiting for me to end the call, he began shouting at me as soon as I responded. He called at 5 in the morning, knowing that I would be sleepy and drowsy when I answered, in an attempt to surprise me. When I eventually took the fourth phone after a while, he went on a furious rant about how unappreciative I was, and how he wished I had never been born. Because I hadn't. Even bothered to see my brother in the hospital when he was in pain and wasn't there for the family, he said he would make sure the rest of the family never spoke to me again. My father was the one who hung up after yelling for about 5 minutes, allowing me to take in what he had just said. He had blocked my phone by the time I was prepared to reply. It wasn't humorous at the time, but now that I think about it, I think it's comical how desperate my parents are to make me the villain. They will go to great lengths to scream at me about insignificant things. As I've said previously, I think they were simply venting their anger on me. I just so happened to be the scapegoat they needed. My father hasn't been able to turn the rest of the family against me, so it's okay. They recall what occurred 5 years ago and are aware that I am not at fault. I only hope my parents would take it easy and concentrate on my brother now that his health is getting better. 3 years have passed and a lot has changed, mainly for the better. For the past year and a half, I've been living in Germany for work, and I've begun seeing my girlfriend. After 8 months of dating, our relationship has been absolutely wonderful. To be honest, it has also been a gift that I haven't spoken to my family for the last 3 years. It's been good to be in touch with my family members that were polite to me. My brother's recovery from the accident is yet incomplete. He is paralyzed below the waist, yet he lived. However, I informed her that an apology was pointless and unneeded at this time. After hearing from some relatives who knew I was relocating to Germany for employment, she came to see me with a flower. My brother was unable to accompany her, though, due to his inability to walk and his feelings of humiliation over what had transpired 8 years prior. I made it apparent that my parents are no longer a part of my life when they attempted to call. I advised them that because they would be contacting a stranger the next time they phoned, it would be best if we never spoke again. I've been in Germany ever since, and I'm very glad that my parents no longer communicate with me. My new girlfriend and I intend to tie the knot shortly. Please leave your views in the space provided below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe, dear listeners.